Hey, if you enjoy cycling and you want to drive up your second threshold, or your FTP, as we typically call it, I want to share this quick case study with you that I just had via email. So a cycling coach sent me a message, said that he had a young rider, 16 years old, that is looking to improve his performance in races, and he seems to be lacking some sustainability at high intensity. It doesn't have the legs typically when it starts to push pretty hard. And so he gave me his numbers. I'm going to run them off the top here. First threshold around 215 watts, measured recently on a exercise step test in a lab with gas exchange measurements. So first threshold 215 watts, up about 25 watts this winter. So it seems like they did a really good job with the foundation this winter. His second threshold hasn't moved much. It's around 255. He's got a estimated FTP from Zwift at 260, so that coincides with that second threshold that he found in the lab. He's got a max aerobic power, which I assume is the end of the step test, at 340 watts. And they've been mainly doing the base endurance through the winter, and they've also been doing quite a bit of long-ish VO2 max intervals. He mentioned a 6x3, so 6 sets of 3 minutes, probably with a 2 or 3 minute rest, I assume, which is high intensity. And he said that, they want to drive up this kid's second threshold. And it's interesting because this kid has a high first threshold, pretty good, getting pretty close to that second threshold, right? But then he has a big gap between his second threshold and his max aerobic power, if we want to consider that as a metric. I don't, but it's the end of his step test. What I see is a narrow gap between first and second threshold, and a big gap between second threshold and the end of his step test. So that would indicate a pretty big W prime, pretty high capacity at high intensity, and relatively low sustainability at second threshold. I'd say mainly because he doesn't work on it, right? So I would qualify his training distribution up until now as being more polarized, so more low intensity and high intensity. And just to be clear, when I say polarized, at least as it's defined today in the literature, there's no percentages that are assigned to low or high or medium intensity. It's a question of proportions. So if I say polarized training, it means that most of the volume is at low intensity, below first threshold. Some of the volume is at high intensity, above second threshold, and very little volume is at medium intensity, between the thresholds. That qualifies as pyramidal training, whether it's 70, 20, 10, with the low, high, and medium, whether it's 80, 20, 0, it doesn't really matter. It's a question of proportions. And then, so what I would recommend for this kid, obviously, is to go towards more pyramidal distribution for a while. And that would mean to keep a base at low intensity, zone 1, zone 2, and then to have most of his intense volume at medium intensity, starting with some first threshold and zone 3 blocks. Extend those from 10 minutes up to about 30 minutes. You could do 2 to 4 intervals per session. And I would kind of ramp that up on the volume side progressively, always apply the principle of progressivity. And then I would switch to some threshold intervals. Those will go from 5-6 minutes all the way up to 10, maybe 12 minutes. And we could do 2 to 5 intervals in a session. We could start playing with some over-under sessions, so going for a minute above second threshold, 2 minutes below, repeating that 2 or 3 times, repeating that a bunch of times in the session. And then we can start mixing it up, right? Nobody says you can't do 30 seconds in zone 6, back to zone 3 for 5 minutes, push for a minute in zone 5, come back to threshold for 5 minutes. You could do anything you want in training, but I would always start with the simpler structures of the sessions and then build up to more complexity, build up to more variation and more kind of options within a session, and then start to make it look like the race, right? So if you know that you're gonna have 3 big climbs in a 4-hour race, for example, well, obviously you can't just do a warm-up, your 3 big blocks of tempo, and then be done with your session and only do that, because then you won't be able to actually perform in the race. So I would start with those first threshold tempo and threshold blocks in an isolated manner. So do a warm up, do those blocks, maybe do a cool down or a bit of extra volume at low intensity and call it a day. And then can progressively integrate those higher intensity blocks, whether it's the first threshold, zone 3, zone 4, progressively integrate those into longer rides, right? So start doing those over a 2-hour period, start doing those over a 3-hour session, start doing those over a 4-hour session. Now you're starting to have a training session that is looking like the race, or at least that allows you to build some durability in the legs in such a way that you will be able to perform this hard 30-minute block of tempo or threshold at the end of a race, because there's a big climb there and you're already tired from 3 or 4 hours of riding. So we have to think about those little aspects of the race, but we start from the profile of the athlete. We look at what he has done, we look at what is missing, and then typically we do what's missing for a while. We see how that drives things up. There was another interesting question in the email, was about VAmax. It has been a controversial model or topic for a while now in exercise physiology. I think it's a very interesting model, and if you haven't come across it, VAmax is a way to express maximum glycolytic capacity, and you would measure that through measuring lactate production or lactate accumulation in the blood after a 30-second all-out effort. So you do a warm up, 30-second all-out effort, and you would measure lactate every minute or two after that, and then you would have a peak in blood lactate, and then it would start going down. And then depending on how high the peak is and then how fast it goes back down, you could determine if the athlete has a high VAmax or a low VAmax. And where that ties into what I just talked about is that typically I've seen an inverse relationship between the second threshold performance and the VAmax, meaning, again, if we take VAmax as an expression of glycolytic capacity, meaning that if you drive up VAmax, you're typically going to lose a little bit of performance at your second threshold. And so for this kid who's going to be working on raising his second threshold, and who we've determined is likely to have a pretty good W prime right now, which is not the same as the VAmax. W prime is your high intensity work capacity above your second threshold, which comes from the critical power model. But there's kind of a link between those two. Typically, individuals with a big W prime also have a big VAmax, because we are talking about that high intensity capacity in some regard, and glycolytic capacity plays into it. So this kid, for whom we're trying to raise the second threshold, should see, if we measure it, a drop in his VAmax during that time, right? If he dedicates the next, 8 to 12 weeks to raising his second threshold, doing a lot of tempo work, doing a lot of threshold work, well, you could also theorize that he's going to improve his lactate recycling capacity. And we know lactate is not the cause of fatigue per se, but we do know that together with lactate accumulation, we see an accumulation of fatigue metabolites like inorganic phosphate in the muscle and hydrogen ions everywhere else, which are going to be the cause of peripheral and central fatigue respectively. So we could say that as you build up your lactate recycling and transport capacity with zone 3, zone 4 training, you're going to decrease that peak lactate that you can generate, right? And we can also think about it from a muscle fiber standpoint, where typically fast twitch fibers are the glycolytic fibers, or they predominantly use glycolysis as a way of generating ATP or recycling ATP, whereas slow twitch fibers will typically be recycling lactate more than producing, right? So we could say that high intensity and very high intensity work is going to target the fast twitch fibers, and as such improve the lactate production of the body via the training of fast twitch fibers. But if you're training predominantly at medium intensity, you're actually training more of your slow twitch fibers, and you're training them to recycle more lactate. I hope that makes sense. So that was just a little case study that a coach shared with me, and I wanted to share with you. And I hope that video was useful. I know I don't have many visuals on hand in English right now to share with you, but if you do want more detailed technical videos like this, please leave comments below if you have any questions. leave them below. It's always a pleasure exchanging with you. I'm really enjoying all the comments I'm getting on the videos from those last few days. So make sure you leave more comments. I don't answer all the comments, but I read all the comments. So make sure you do this. And also, if you want to check out some more free videos, I've got a little cardio guide for you. You can sign up for it in the description. Click the link, enter your email, your name, and you'll get access to those 4 free videos right away. Hope that was helpful. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care.